A few winters back, about 6 months after my divorce, I was desperate for a change of scenery. Christina, my girlfriend at the time, suggested we escape somewhere quiet, away from the chaos that had been my life lately. We found a rental on a lake in upstate New York and booked it for a week without much debate. The house was exactly what I needed. Modern, cozy, nestled right on the lakeshore, surrounded by woods, and with only a handful of other properties scattered along the water's edge. Most of those were empty, since it wasn't exactly prime time for lakefront getaways. Honestly, that was a bonus. I wanted to be as far from civilization as possible. The host wasn't going to be there, but he left us detailed instructions on where to find the keys and a few notes about the house. Typical Airbnb stuff. When we arrived that morning, there was a small package waiting on the front steps. No return address, just a handwritten note. Enjoy your stay. Make sure to stay warm. It was kind of sweet, but inside the package was a tiny box of matches. We figured it was a quirky welcome gift, strange but harmless. Christina laughed and joked about how people upstate are always a little odd, and we moved on. The first 2 days were exactly what I'd hoped for. Long hikes through the snow, hot drinks by the fireplace, and total peace and quiet. The snow had been falling steadily since we got there. Not quite a blizzard, but enough to make the landscape feel untouched and serene. The master bedroom was on the second floor with huge windows overlooking the lake. At night, we could hear the soft patter of snowflakes on the glass, and there was even a skylight so we could fall asleep under the winter sky. On the third night, sometime after midnight, I woke up to a strange sound. It was barely audible over the wind and the snow, but it stuck out to me because it sounded mechanical, man-made, not natural. Curious, I got up quietly so I wouldn't wake Christina and walked to the window. Through the heavy snowfall, I saw something totally unexpected. A snowmobile moving slowly across the frozen lake. Now, snowmobiles on frozen lakes aren't exactly rare, but it was so late, and the snow was coming down harder than ever. The driver was moving cautiously like they weren't sure about the ice, and then they stopped completely. I watched as the person got off the snowmobile and started waving their arms, clearly trying to get someone's attention. It looked like they were shouting, but I couldn't make out the words. What really freaked me out was that they were facing directly toward our house. Did they know we were there? Either way, it looked like they needed help. I woke Christina and explained the situation, then quickly got dressed and headed downstairs. The moment I stepped outside, the cold hit me like a wall. The woman on the ice, now I could tell she was a woman, was shouting for help, saying she'd lost her little boy somewhere in the snowstorm. She sounded frantic, on the verge of hysteria. There was no question in my mind. If a child was out, there alone in that weather, he wouldn't last long. I laced up my boots and started across the ice, telling Christina to stay inside and call for help if she needed to. As I got closer, I could see she was bundled up in a thick fur coat with her hair pulled back in a tight braid. The ice was solid, so I stopped worrying about the possibility of falling through. She kept repeating that her son had run away from home and she was looking for him. That gave me pause. I'd expected her to say he'd fallen off the snowmobile or something more plausible. How do you not notice your own kid falling off a snowmobile? The adrenaline must have clouded my judgment because I didn't think about that until I was almost standing in front of her. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. Do you still have those matches? For a split second, I had no idea what she meant. Then it all clicked. The matches. The package from the first day. The note. She had left it, not the host. Before I could react, she pulled a gun from her coat and demanded my wallet and phone. I handed them over. What else could I do? The whole thing happened in, less than 30 seconds. Without another word, she climbed back onto the snowmobile and disappeared into the whiteout. As soon as she was gone, I sprinted back to the house, yelling for Christina to call the police. She was already on the phone when I burst inside. We locked the doors and waited, both of us shaken. The police showed up about an hour later, but by then the fresh snow had covered any tracks she might have left. Christina was in tears, and I was just furious. I'd come here for peace, and this was what I got. The police found an old boat ramp on the far side of the lake and guessed she'd come from there. I was angry and insisted they keep searching, but they said there wasn't much they could do. Even if she'd left something behind, it would be buried in the snow. Christina and I tried tracking my phone, but it was already offline. The one silver lining was that the Airbnb host refunded our entire trip. He sounded genuinely shocked when I told him what happened and swore he knew nothing about the package. But something about the whole thing just didn't sit right with me. How could that woman have known we'd be there? Why go to such elaborate lengths for a simple robbery? I couldn't shake the feeling that the host was involved, but I had no proof. I reported it to Airbnb, but they were predictably unhelpful. For months after, I couldn't help but wonder if my ex-wife had something to do with it. The thought made me angry, imagining her laughing at my expense. I've since accepted that's probably just paranoia, but the whole thing still doesn't make sense. Why would someone go through all that trouble for a wallet and phone, unless they were seriously disturbed and got some twisted satisfaction out of it? My family owns a lake house in Northern California that we visit for a couple of weeks each summer. It's 2 stories tall with an attic. When my younger sister and I were kids, we used to climb up there with sleeping bags and pretend we were camping, even bringing our puppy along. There was a small window in the attic that looked out over the lake, and we loved spying on people from up there. As we got older, we outgrew our attic adventures, which was a little sad, but that's just part of growing up. When our grandparents passed away, my parents inherited the rest of their furniture. We had space for the bigger pieces, but the attic ended up packed with smaller hand-me-downs. My parents couldn't bear to get rid of any of it. It was all they had left of Nana and Pop. It felt bittersweet, but also comforting to know their cherished possessions were still with us, watching over the house in a way. That whole period felt like the end of my childhood, and I'm sure my sister would agree. As we got older, it became harder for us to make the trip out to the lake house because of school and my parents' work. At best, we could manage a week, together in the summer. My parents didn't want to rent it out during the off-season because they were worried about the antiques being damaged or stolen. So for most of the year, the house sat empty, maintained only by landscapers. A few years ago, my parents met a local elderly veteran who worked as an antique restorationist. Eventually, they signed a year-long lease with him, trusting that he'd take care of the place. He was a small, disfigured man with white hair and a greasy beard, and he had a gruff, unsettling voice. We all thought he was a little odd, but my dad bonded with him over their shared military background. Dad always said that none of us could understand what it meant to serve your country, and that guys like him deserved a good deal on a place to stay. None of us kids had a say in the decision, but I'll admit the guy creeped me out. We were also a bit annoyed that renting to him meant we couldn't visit the lake house that summer. Still, my parents could use the extra cash for college expenses, so my sister and I got over it. Even though they trusted him, my parents checked in on him periodically through updates from the landscapers. It might sound invasive, but the guy was getting a great deal, and he couldn't really maintain the property by himself. My dad figured the rent at least covered the maintenance. For a while, things seemed fine. But then the landscapers started telling my mom about the man's odd behavior. They'd see him sitting on the porch staring at the children playing by the lake, and they caught him doing other things I won't repeat. My mom was horrified and spent months arguing with my dad about how irresponsible it was to let someone like that stay in the house. Eventually, Dad relented. When the lease was up, he told the tenant they needed to do work on the house that would leave it without electricity or plumbing for a while. The guy left without much fuss, and my parents even paid the landscapers extra to help him move out. I was relieved to see him go. It always felt weird having someone so strange with unlimited access to our house. About a year after that, my sister graduated college, so my parents took time off and we all went to the lake house for a summer trip. They'd recently gotten a black lab mix named Bear, and my sister was excited to meet him. We arrived just as the sun was setting and decided to leave Bear inside while we went into town for dinner. The house wasn't stocked with groceries, so we didn't have much choice. Before we left, I noticed Bear seemed agitated, ears perked, pacing, like he was waiting for something. I figured it was just the stress of the trip and brushed it off. Weren't gone long, but when we came back, something felt off immediately. I saw Bear lying at the bottom of the stairs, panting hard, with blood smeared on the floor beneath him. My sister screamed. My mom pulled out her phone to call 911, and my dad went straight to the kitchen for a knife. I grabbed one too, and together we searched the house for an intruder. Upstairs, my dad stopped me at the attic hatch. It was cracked open, just enough to see a faint flashlight beam shining down. I was frozen with fear, but my dad yanked the hatch open and climbed up. I stayed put, too scared to follow. I listened, expecting a fight, but heard nothing. A moment later, Dad came back down looking torn. He whispered that it was our old tenant up there. When my mom found out, she started screaming. Dad wanted to let the guy go, but my mom wasn't having it. She'd already called the police. When they arrived, they found the man in the attic and carried him down. He looked terrible, and I could see my dad felt sorry for him. The police found our house key on him, which infuriated my mom, since Dad had promised he'd change the locks. Bear survived, though he was badly hurt. As awful as the situation was, my dad refused to press charges, no matter how much my mom and sister argued. That was one of the biggest fights my parents ever had. I never understood why my dad had so much sympathy for someone who'd stabbed his dog. It's been a year since then, and we haven't been back to the lake house. That experience ruined my childhood image of the place, and honestly, I don't think I want to go back. This happened last summer when I was 20. My name's Kevin. My friend James comes from a seriously wealthy family. His dad is some kind of IP lawyer who does government contracts. They own properties all over the country and even a few overseas. One of their houses is on a large, secluded lake. The lake isn't so big that you can't see the houses on the other side, but swimming across would be a serious workout. James's parents were rarely around, so he pretty much had free reign over the place and often invited friends over. There's something about being out on a lake that makes you feel invincible. It's not like the beach, it's more exclusive, hard to explain. Maybe one day I'll be successful enough to have a place like that. Most of the houses around the lake are vacation homes, so the area is usually quiet, with a lot of empty, dark houses. That meant James could throw wild parties without worrying about neighbors calling the cops. But this night was different. It was just the two of us hanging out. I'd just broken up with my girlfriend of 3 years and needed some bro time. We were having a few beers on the dock when I noticed a light flickering across the lake. At first, I thought it was just the sun reflecting off something, but even when I moved, I could still see it. It was flashing on and off in a pattern. I pointed it out to James, and we both stared, trying to figure it out. Eventually, we realized the pattern wasn't random. 3 short flashes, 3 long, 3 short again. James snapped his fingers and said it was Morse code, SOS. I thought he was joking, but I checked my phone and he was right. The flashing continued for another minute, then stopped. We didn't know what to think. Maybe it was a prank, but there was always the chance someone was actually in trouble. James wanted to call the cops, but we'd been drinking and weren't legal yet. I was already dealing with a DUI charge and didn't need more trouble. James wasn't thrilled, but we both agreed we should check it out ourselves. We grabbed a couple of switchblades from James's brother's room. He's kind of a weird guy and collects them. James said he was good to drive, but I wasn't comfortable with that, so we decided to kayak across the lake instead. At first, we were laughing and joking, but the further we got, the quieter we became. The sun was almost down, and the light from the houses was the only thing guiding us. As we got closer, the house came into view. It was big like the others, but clearly neglected. The dock was half collapsed, literally sinking into the water. The flashing had stopped, which made us nervous. We couldn't tie the kayak to the dock, so we beached it on the yard and climbed out. The adrenaline kicked in as we looked up at the house. The light had come from a second-floor window. James started to freak out and wanted to leave, but I reminded him we'd have to kayak all the way back to call for help. There was no cell service on the lake. I convinced him we'd explored plenty of abandoned buildings before, and this wasn't much different. He reluctantly agreed. We crept around the house and found an unlocked window. Slipping inside, we found the place completely empty. No furniture, no junk, nothing. It didn't even look like anyone had ever lived there. We moved quietly, searching for the stairs. Every room was as bare as the last. Eventually, we found the stairs and made our way up. We figured out which room the light had come from, and I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. James nodded, and I slowly pushed it open. The room was empty except for one thing, an old projector pointed at the window. That's when it hit me. This was a trap. Someone had set this up deliberately. James must have realized it too, because I heard him start sprinting back the way we came, not even trying to be quiet. I turned and followed, and as we ran down the stairs, I heard a door, probably a closet, swing, open in the room we'd just left, followed by rapid footsteps. We bolted through the house and out the window. As I was climbing out, I heard those footsteps coming down the stairs behind me. I didn't look back, I just ran to catch up with James, who was already at the lake's edge. That's when I realized the kayak was gone. I turned and saw someone running toward us from the side of the house. He was fast and clearly an adult, but I couldn't get a good look at him. I pulled out my switchblade ready to defend myself, but James just jumped straight into the lake, clothes and all. I followed without thinking. The water was freezing, but I didn't care. We swam as fast as we could toward the lights of James's house, which seemed miles away. That swim felt endless, but fueled by adrenaline. We finally made it. We dragged ourselves onto the dock, shivering uncontrollably, and ran inside, locking every door before calling the police. It took them almost an hour to show up, which was ridiculous. When they did, they went across the lake to investigate. They came back and told us what I expected. There was no one there. The house had been abandoned for years. No signs of recent activity, no footprints, nothing. Just an empty house. The cops weren't happy with us and gave us a lecture about not calling sooner. James's parents were furious when they found out and threatened to sue the town and the police for not investigating further. I wasn't invited back after that. To this day, I have no idea what really happened, who set that trap, or what they planned to do if we hadn't run. Most of my friends think it was a setup, and that whoever was behind it got cold feet at the last minute. I try not to think about what might have happened if they'd gone through with whatever they were planning,